Right now, millions of people are living with diabetes without realizing their body is slowly being damaged from the inside. Your eyes, nerves, kidneys, even your heart can be affected, long before a single symptom appears. But here's the shocking part. Most people only discover this damage when it's already advanced. So in this video, we're going to break down the 5 hidden ways diabetes silently damages the body. Right now, inside the body of someone living with diabetes, something is happening that most doctors don't talk about enough, and most patients don't discover until the damage has already been done. It starts with blood sugar. When glucose levels stay elevated for extended periods of time, the body begins to experience a kind of slow, invisible corrosion. Not on the outside, where you could see it or feel it, but deep inside the walls of your blood vessels, the very network your body depends on to stay alive. Every artery, every vein, every tiny capillary running through your organs and tissues relies on healthy, flexible vessel walls to function properly, and diabetes quietly begins to compromise all of that. To understand what's really happening, picture a garden hose that's been left out in the sun for years. Over time, the material starts to crack, stiffen, and lose its ability to flex. Our water still moves through it, but not as freely, not as efficiently, and with far more resistance than before. Now imagine that same process happening inside your body, not over years of sun exposure, but over years of elevated blood sugar, silently attacking the inner lining of your vessels from the inside out. The medical term for this inner lining is the endothelium, and it is far more important than most people realize. It doesn't just act as a passive barrier. It actively regulates blood flow, controls inflammation, prevents clotting, and helps deliver oxygen precisely where it needs to go. But when blood glucose is chronically high, sugar molecules begin to attach to proteins in a process called glycation. This stiffens the vessel walls, triggers inflammation, and slowly strips the endothelium of its ability to do its job properly. What follows from there is a cascade that affects the entire body. As the vessel walls thicken and harden, blood flow becomes restricted. Oxygen delivery to organs and tissues starts to drop. The body tries to compensate at first. The heart pumps harder, blood pressure rises, and the circulatory system pushes against the resistance. But compensation has a limit, and the longer blood sugar stays uncontrolled, the more the damage compounds on itself, quietly and relentlessly. What makes this so particularly dangerous is that none of it hurts. There is no alarm, no obvious warning sign that something is wrong beneath the surface. People go about their daily lives feeling relatively normal while their vascular system is being slowly undermined. By the time symptoms do appear, fatigue that won't go away, slow healing wounds, unexplained swelling, significant damage has often already accumulated over months or even years. This is why blood vessel damage is considered the root of almost every serious diabetic complication. It is not one isolated problem. It is the starting point for a chain reaction that reaches into nearly every corner of the body. The kidneys need healthy blood vessels to filter properly. The nerves need healthy blood vessels to receive nutrients and oxygen. The heart needs healthy arteries to pump blood without resistance. Even the brain depends on a steady, clean blood supply to function at its best. When the foundation of the vascular system is compromised, every organ that depends on it begins to pay a price. And the most sobering truth of all is that this damage doesn't begin the moment someone is diagnosed with diabetes. Research suggests that vascular deterioration can begin years earlier, during the pre-diabetic stage, when blood sugar is elevated but not yet high enough to trigger a formal diagnosis, which means millions of people are already on this path without knowing it, their blood vessels quietly weakening while life continues as normal on the surface. Deep inside your eye, in a thin and delicate layer of tissue, no thicker than a piece of plastic wrap, lies one of the most intricate and vulnerable systems in the entire human body. The retina is responsible for capturing every image you see, translating light into electrical signals and sending those signals to your brain in real time. It is constantly working, constantly demanding a fresh and steady supply of blood and oxygen to function. And it is fed by thousands of microscopic blood vessels so small, so fragile, that they are among the first in the entire body to show the effects of sustained high blood sugar. This is where diabetic retinopathy begins, not with sudden vision loss, not with dramatic symptoms, but with invisible changes happening at a microscopic level deep inside the eye. When blood glucose stays elevated over time, those tiny vessels that nourish the retina begin to weaken. Their walls become thin, lose structural integrity, and start to bulge outward in small balloon-like formations called microaneurysms. These microaneurysms are often the earliest detectable sign that something is going wrong. And yet most people have absolutely no idea they are forming because at this stage, vision still feels completely normal. As the damage continues, those weakened vessels begin to leak. Fluid, fat deposits, and blood seep out into the surrounding retinal tissue. When this happens near the center of the retina, a region called the macula, which is responsible for sharp, detailed central vision, it causes a condition known as macular edema. This is when vision starts to noticeably blur, colors may appear washed out, and reading or recognizing faces becomes increasingly difficult. Still, even at this stage, many people attribute the changes to aging or eye strain, buying reading glasses rather than seeking a medical evaluation. But what makes diabetic retinopathy particularly insidious is the way it progresses silently through its early stages. The eye has no pain receptors in the retina itself, which means there is no discomfort to signal that damage is accumulating. A person can lose a significant portion of their peripheral vision without ever feeling any pain or pressure. They simply begin to notice that their world looks slightly different, darker at the edges, hazier in the center, and by the time that awareness sets in, the disease has often already advanced into more serious territory. In later stages, the body attempts to repair the damaged vessels by growing new ones, a process called neovascularization. But these new blood vessels are abnormal, structurally weak, and prone to bleeding directly into the vitreous, the clear gel-like fluid that fills the interior of the eye. When this happens, vision can deteriorate rapidly. Dark floaters appear, but shadows obscure large portions of the visual field. In severe cases, the new vessels create scar tissue that pulls on the retina, causing it to detach, and a detached retina, if not treated immediately, can result in permanent blindness. What is perhaps the most painful reality surrounding diabetic retinopathy is not the vision loss itself, but the fact that it is largely preventable. Consistent blood sugar management, regular comprehensive eye examinations, and early intervention can dramatically slow or even halt the progression of this disease. Laser treatments and injections exist that can stabilize the condition when caught in time. But those treatments only work when the disease is found early enough, and that requires awareness, monitoring, and a willingness to look for problems before symptoms make themselves known. The eyes are often called the windows to the soul, but in diabetes, they are something even more important. They are one of the earliest windows into the health of your entire vascular system, quietly reflecting damage that is simultaneously unfolding in organs far beyond what any mirror can show. There is an organ in your body that works every single minute of every single day without rest, without pause, and almost entirely without recognition. Most people never think about it until something goes wrong. It asks for nothing in return for its labor. It simply filters, cleans, and balances, hour after hour, year after year, keeping your blood free of the waste products that would otherwise poison you from the inside. That organ is your kidney, and in people living with diabetes, it is one of the most quietly and consistently devastated organs in the entire body. To appreciate the scale of what the kidneys do, consider this. Every single day, your 2 kidneys filter approximately 200 liters of blood, extracting waste excess salts, and toxins, and converting them into urine while carefully returning everything the body still needs back into circulation. Inside each kidney are roughly 1 million microscopic filtering units called nephrons. Each nephron contains a tiny cluster of capillaries, incredibly small blood vessels, wrapped inside a delicate structure called the glomerulus. This is where the real work happens, and this is precisely where diabetes begins to cause its damage. When blood sugar stays chronically elevated, the high glucose concentration puts enormous pressure on these filtering units. The capillaries inside the glomerulus are forced to work harder, and filtering larger volumes of blood than they were designed to handle. Over time, this relentless pressure causes the vessel walls to thicken and scar. The filtering membrane becomes increasingly leaky, and proteins that are supposed to stay in the blood, particularly a protein called albumin, begin to spill through into the urine. This protein leakage, called microalbuminuria, is one of the earliest detectable signs that the kidneys are under stress, and it typically appears years before any noticeable symptoms develop. What makes diabetic kidney disease, formerly known as diabetic nephropathy, so dangerous is how extraordinarily quiet it is during its early and middle stages. The kidneys have a remarkable capacity to compensate for damage by working even harder with whatever functional tissue remains. A person can lose nearly half of their kidney function and still feel completely normal in their daily life. There are no obvious signs, and no dramatic shifts in how the body feels, no clear signal that something is going wrong beneath the surface. By the time symptoms like swelling in the legs, persistent fatigue, nausea, or changes in urination become noticeable, kidney function has often already declined to a critically low level. This progression does not happen in isolation. As the kidneys lose their ability to filter effectively, waste products and excess fluids begin to accumulate in the blood. Blood pressure rises. It's because damaged kidneys struggle to regulate fluid balance properly, and elevated blood pressure, in turn, accelerates further kidney damage, a brutal cycle that feeds itself and becomes increasingly difficult to interrupt the longer it continues. The interaction between diabetes, kidney disease, and high blood pressure creates a compounding effect that can drive a person toward kidney failure far faster than any single factor alone would. End-stage kidney disease, the point at which the kidneys can no longer sustain life on their own, is one of the most life-altering outcomes of unmanaged diabetes. At that stage, a person faces either dialysis, a process that artificially filters the blood several times per week for hours at a time, or a kidney transplant, which carries its own profound medical and personal challenges. Both options fundamentally change the way a person lives, works, and experiences daily life in ways that are difficult to fully comprehend until you are living them. And yet, like so many diabetic complications, kidney disease does not arrive without warning. It arrives without symptoms, which is an entirely different thing. The warnings are there in blood tests and urine samples, in blood pressure readings and glucose logs, quietly signaling long before the damage becomes irreversible that the kidneys are struggling and need intervention now, not later. There is a communication network running through every inch of your body that most people never think about until it stops working properly. It operates silently in the background, carrying millions of signals every second, telling your heart when to beat faster, your lungs when to breathe deeper, your hands when something is too hot to touch, your feet when the ground beneath them is uneven. This network is your nervous system, and it is so vast, so intricate, and so deeply embedded in every function your body performs that when it begins to break down, the consequences reach into almost every corner of your daily life in ways that are as varied as they are devastating. In people living with diabetes, this breakdown has a name: diabetic neuropathy, and it is one of the most common, most debilitating, and most underappreciated complications of the disease. Estimates suggest that up to half of all people with diabetes will develop some form of nerve damage during their lifetime. Yet despite how widespread it is, many people either don't recognize the early signs for what they are, or they dismiss them as normal aging, tiredness, or stress, losing precious time during which early intervention could have made a meaningful difference. To understand how diabetes damages nerves, you have to understand what nerves actually need to survive. Like every other tissue in the body, nerves depend on a consistent and healthy blood supply to receive the oxygen and nutrients that keep them functioning. They are also surrounded and protected by a fatty insulating layer called the myelin sheath, which ensures that electrical signals travel quickly and accurately from one point to another. When blood sugar remains chronically elevated, two things begin to happen simultaneously. The small blood vessels that feed the nerves are damaged, in the same way diabetes damages blood vessels throughout the rest of the body, starving the nerve fibers of the nourishment they need. At the same time, excess glucose directly damages the myelin sheath itself, disrupting signal transmission and leaving nerve fibers increasingly exposed and vulnerable. And the result of this dual assault is a gradual but progressive erosion of nerve function that typically begins in the longest nerve fibers in the body, the ones that travel all the way down to the feet and toes. This is why diabetic neuropathy almost always starts from the ground up, creating what doctors often describe as a stocking and glove pattern of symptoms that slowly spreads upward over time. In the early stages, people notice a tingling sensation, almost like the feeling of a limb falling asleep, that doesn't go away. This is followed by burning, stabbing, or electric shock-like pain that is often worse at night, disrupting sleep and making rest feel impossible. Some people experience an extreme sensitivity to touch, where even the light pressure of a bedsheet against their feet becomes genuinely painful. But as the disease progresses, something even more dangerous begins to happen. The pain starts to disappear. This might sound like a welcome relief after months or years of discomfort, but the disappearance of sensation is not healing. It is the nervous system going quiet because the nerve fibers have been so severely damaged that they can no longer transmit signals at all. At this point, a person can step on a nail, develop a blister, sustain a burn, or fracture a bone, and feel absolutely nothing. Wounds go unnoticed, infections take hold silently. When tissue begins to break down without any pain response to alert the person that something is wrong. This loss of protective sensation is the primary reason why diabetes is the leading cause of non-traumatic lower limb amputations worldwide. Not because the disease directly destroys the foot, but because damaged nerves remove the body's most fundamental warning system, allowing small, entirely treatable injuries to escalate into life-threatening infections before anyone realizes the danger that has been quietly building beneath the surface all along. Of all the organs that diabetes silently targets over time, none carries higher stakes than the heart. It is the engine of the entire body, the one organ whose failure leaves no room for gradual decline or quiet compensation. And yet, despite how critical it is, the cardiovascular damage caused by diabetes unfolds in exactly the same way as every other complication, slowly, invisibly, and almost entirely without warning, until the moment something catastrophic forces the truth into the open. And the relationship between diabetes and heart disease is not a coincidence or a simple association. It is a direct, biological, cause and effect connection driven by the same fundamental problem that damages blood vessels, kidneys, eyes, and nerves, chronically elevated blood sugar creating a state of sustained internal assault on the body's most vital systems. But when that assault targets the cardiovascular system, the consequences are amplified by the sheer importance of what is being damaged and the speed with which a compromised heart can move from struggling to failing. It begins with inflammation. High blood sugar triggers a persistent, low-grade inflammatory response throughout the entire body, and the inner walls of the arteries are among the first and most severely affected targets. This chronic inflammation damages the endothelium, the smooth, protective lining inside every artery, making it sticky, rough, and increasingly permeable. Once that lining is compromised, LDL cholesterol particles, often referred to as bad cholesterol, begin to penetrate beneath the surface and accumulate within the arterial wall. The immune system responds by sending white blood cells to address the invasion, but instead of resolving the problem, those cells absorb the cholesterol and transform into foam cells that become embedded in the arterial wall, forming the foundation of what will eventually become plaque. This process, known as atherosclerosis, and is not unique to people with diabetes. But in diabetics, it happens faster, more aggressively, and across a wider network of arteries than in people with healthy blood sugar levels. The plaques that develop are also less stable, more prone to rupturing suddenly, and more likely to trigger the kind of acute blood clot formation that causes a heart attack or stroke without any preceding warning. People with diabetes don't just have a slightly elevated cardiovascular risk. They have a risk profile that, in many cases, mirrors that of someone who has already had a heart attack, even if their heart has never shown any outward signs of disease. Compounding all of this is the effect diabetes has on several other cardiovascular risk factors simultaneously. High blood sugar damages the kidneys, and damaged kidneys struggle to regulate fluid balance and blood pressure, are causing hypertension that forces the heart to pump against increased resistance day after day. Diabetes also alters the balance of fats in the bloodstream, raising triglycerides and lowering the protective HDL cholesterol that helps clear arterial walls. It promotes abnormal clotting by making platelets in the blood stickier and more reactive. And it damages the autonomic nerves that regulate heart rhythm, and sometimes causing a condition called diabetic cardiomyopathy, where the heart muscle itself becomes stiff, weakened, and less able to pump effectively even in the absence of blocked arteries. What is perhaps most alarming about cardiovascular damage in diabetics is that heart attacks in this population often present differently than they do in people without the disease. Because diabetes damages the nerves that carry pain signals, many diabetics experience what are called silent heart attacks, cardiac events that occur without the classic crushing chest pain that typically sends people rushing to the emergency room. The heart is being damaged, blood flow is being cut off, and muscle is dying, all while the person feels nothing more than mild fatigue or slight shortness of breath, dismissing it as a long week or a poor night of sleep, and never suspecting that their heart has just been permanently and irrevocably changed